exercise of cancelling 30 licenses, we were assured by him a few minutes later, will make no difference to Israel's ability to wage military conflict. So what is the point of it other than a cosmetic exercise to try and buy a bit of peace for the government? Well, I'm not here to give peace to those people that are supplying weapons, that are raining down on children in Gaza. I'm not here to make life easy for the weapons manufacturers. We are here because we want to see an end to the conflict by a ceasefire, by the withdrawal of all Israeli forces from Gaza and the West Bank. And we're here because what is going on is unbelievably outrageous. The killing of people by the latest bombardment of what was supposed to be a safe zone. People drowning in sand because the sand is blown around by the explosion. Just imagine that. You're suddenly covered in sand and your last memory of life is a terrible choking feeling as you can no longer breathe and your mouth and your nose are full of sand. And that is what's happening to people in Gaza. 40,000 already dead. Children who've survived but lost all their family will have what's called survivor's guilt for the rest of their lives. Why are they alive? Their mum, their dad, their auntie, cousins, all gone. That is the reality of what this bombardment has done. And it's not surprising that the International Court of Justice has declared it to be acts of genocide, that the ICC has issued arrest warrants against the leaders of the Israeli government, that the Geneva Convention on the duties of occupying powers has been breached so many times, the UN Security Council has been breached, the UN General Assembly has been breached. So I asked myself this question: if this was any other country in the world, would Britain still be supplying weapons? Would we still be having a normal relationship with that government? No, of course we wouldn't. And so the demand to stop all arms supplies is a very strong and very serious one. It's not just arms supplies, it is the technology that goes with them, it is the surveillance flights that take place over Gaza, it is what happens to that information collected by those surveillance flights, it is what is going on at Royal Air Force Base in Akrotiri as a staging point towards taking weapons into Israel. As our demonstrations go on, more and more comes out, more and more information comes out, more and more news comes out. And so we've got to carry on doing it. We've got to be here today because of what's happened in the last few hours almost, last couple of days. We've also got to be in Liverpool on the 21st, and that means there'll be an awful lot of media there, so there needs to be a lot of flags and a lot of noise there. And on October the 5th is the next national demonstration. Let's make that even bigger than the biggest ones we've had before. Keep on growing the numbers, because that makes a lot of people very, very nervous, and that itself will bring about that sense of international solidarity. We cannot be silent, we cannot be idle, we cannot just be spectators. We have got to do everything we can to support the rights of the Palestinian people to be able to live in peace. The occupation has gone on longer than my lifetime. The idea for any of us here who've not lived under occupation of not being able to move freely around your own community because of a checkpoint, because of soldiers, because of being stopped by this occupying power, that is the reality of life for most Palestinian people. It's our duty to stand in solidarity with them. This government seems to be able to find money for weapons, seems to be able to somehow or other continue supplying arms to Israel, knowing what will happen to them, yet at the same time take the winter fuel allowance away from cold, older people in this country and refuse to lift the cap of the two-child benefit policy. They seem able to continue the levels of injustice, inequality and poverty the Tories left behind, and seem to want to carry on with the foreign policy they have. I say no, I say unity, I say march, I say demonstrate, I say stand with the people of Palestine. Thank you. Oh, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And what a comparison with the politicians in that building right there who are continuing to facilitate this genocide. When I say Keir Starmer, you say blood on your hands. Keir Starmer! Keir Starmer! David Lammy! Keir Starmer! David Lammy! Keir Starmer! Now our next speaker is a senior campaigner on Palestine at War on Want, which is an organization that has been at the forefront of campaigning against Israel's genocide in Gaza and its apartheid. Make some noise for Neil Salmons!
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. May peace be enjoyed, particularly by the Palestinians who endured such a deficit, not only for the last 11 months, but for many decades. We stand here sharing pain and anger for all the dozens of victims of the appalling attack on the so-called safe zone at Al-Mawasi, Khan Yunis, the night before last. We remember those who lost their lives then, who were killed then, the lives they had, the lives they were going to have. And we also remember the other recent victims and longer victims of the settler colonial project, which is at the heart of the conflict in Palestine now. In recent days, we've seen Ashur shot dead in the West Bank. As she accompanied a 62-year-old person who had walking difficulties, shot by an Israeli sniper at 150 meters. She was Remember Lejeune, 16-year-old girl in her home near Jenin, shot in the head by an Israeli sniper. The ambulance which tried to save her life, but were impeded for 20 minutes. TCO Palestine, you may know, Defense of Children International Palestine, reported this week a report of years attacks on Palestinian children. That Israeli snipers and other Israeli forces systematically target Palestinian children, often to kill them. It's also routine that medics coming to save their lives or treat them are impeded by the Israeli forces. They say it's often, so it's absolute, that there is never any accountability for the perpetrators of those killings and attacks. And it's often the case that the children's bodies are then withheld, they're confiscated from the parents and they're not given back to the family. How wrong is that? DCI Palestine, you might recall a few years ago, alerted the US State Department, but I'm sorry for the subject, but that there had been credible reports with evidence of a rape of a Palestinian boy in Israeli custody. That was at the Al-Mostabiyah Center in Jerusalem. What did the US and Israel do about it? Worse, they designated DCIP a terrorist organization. And they complicated this. Thank you. Yeah. Lost my track there. And now look what happens when you have such sexual abuse in detention with impunity. There's now dozens of cases of rape in detention, and even Israelis openly protesting for the right to rape Palestinian detainees. Absolutely warped. Back into Gaza. Oh, sorry, no, same with detention. Think of any 14-year-old, you know, a brother, a neighbor. Then think of Ammar in the West Bank. He's just been sentenced to 4 months in administrative detention. He's 14. 4 months in administrative detention, no charge, no trial. and he's among 250 Palestinian children in Israeli prisons now. Now, when torture is rife and with impunity in those prisons, imagine what his mental and physical state is going to be, and all the other prisoners and detainees there. Now, back into Gaza. Think of a 1-year-old you know. Then think of Abdurrahman from Deir al-Balah. He's the person with the proven case of polio. Polio which has now arisen because the Palestinian Health Service has been destroyed on purpose by the Israeli forces, and there's been a blockade for 17 years of Gaza. One which a certain person over there, you remember him saying that yes, Israel has the right to blockade 2 million people in Gaza. That's what happens when you enable anyone who's carrying out war crimes, any state which commits to inexorably dispossess and fragment the Palestinian people, and you do it also by providing trade preferences, providing arms, by importing from settlements and allowing billions of pounds worth of investment into those settlements. Then, what happened with the polio? The UN tried to go in. You saw like a couple of vehicles got stopped by the Israeli forces, rammed by bulldozers and tanks and a weaponized bulldozer, and had debris dropped upon them. Stopped for 8 hours, they weren't allowed to go in. My time is up, but I know we will continue protesting, you will continue protesting, until the genocide ends, until apartheid ends, until the occupation ends, till Palestine is free. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Thank you. Habba Salam. Love and respect.
Thank you very much. We have 4 speakers to go, but I can tell some of you are getting cold, so let's warm ourselves up. Loud as you can. Free, free! 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 Now, our next speaker is the Vice Chair of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, one of the organizers of today's and every demonstration that we have had for 11 months. Make some noise for Sophie Bolt!
Thank you very much. So I send solidarity greetings from the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. It's absolutely incredible to see so many of you here yet again. Big up for yourself. Well done for being here. We are utterly outraged and horrified, aren't we, by Israel's latest atrocity on Al-Mawazi refugee camp. This time it launched at least 5 missiles on the camp in the dead of night, killing and injuring nearly 100 Palestinians. And as has been said, the scale of the missile attacks left these absolutely huge craters 30 feet deep, burying over 20 whole families under the sand. I'm sure we've all seen the aerial photos of this camp. Tents are packed so tightly across this really thin strip of land at the very edge of Gaza, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been forced to flee Israel's genocidal slaughter. This is just the latest war crime in 11 months of slaughter of these Palestinian people, with over now 41,000 killed and nearly 100,000 are injured. But how many more people struggling to survive starvation and disease in these designated humanitarian zones will Israel slaughter with its huge military arsenal of tanks and missiles and fighter jets? This genocide has got to end. And this government, it has blood on its hands. We knew that the lethal fighter jets made with parts from British arms companies had already killed and injured at least 400 people at Al-Mawazi. The British government knew this. David Lammy knew this. So, we call on you, David Lammy. You have to end all the arms sales to Israel now. We will keep up the pressure until you do. We have to. Now, it's absolutely amazing to see that the Trade Union Congress, as has been said, representing over 5 million workers, has backed this call today. We are part of a global movement calling for this arms embargo. And we will never stop. We will never stop calling for this arms embargo until the killing stops, until the occupation ends, until there is freedom and justice for the Palestinian people. Free, free! Free, free! Free, free! Solidarity!
Thank you very much, Sophie. Now we know that Israel has been targeting civilians in Gaza, has been targeting children, has been targeting the elderly, has been targeting journalists, and has been targeting deliberately health workers. So please make some noise for our next speaker, who is a doctor organizing with Health Workers for Palestine. Make some noise for James Smith.
Thank you, folks. I'm an NHS doctor.
Well done, you!
The deep privilege of spending 2.5 months in Gaza during the course of this genocide, working with Palestinian healthcare workers. On the 24th of October, within 10 days of the worst violence that Israel has ever committed against the Palestinian people, the Palestinian Ministry of Health declared that Gaza's health system had, I quote, totally collapsed. What is left after total collapse? People are left, of course. Thousands of Palestinian healthcare workers throughout Gaza, and of course more than 2 million Palestinians still living in the Gaza Strip. Determination is left too. Care is left. And so is the liberatory potential of medicine. And I say liberatory in the sense that insofar as settler colonialism seeks to eradicate the Palestinian people, and the aim of genocide is to exterminate the Palestinian people, care, compassion, and survival become acts of liberation. Palestinian healthcare workers in Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and throughout 1948 Palestine have endured the most horrific hardship for 11 months and more than 76 years. Some of my now friends and colleagues were born under the sound of Israeli warplanes, trained in medicine under the occupation, and now care for patients in the midst of the genocide. Healthcare workers have become expert at identifying the smell, the sound, and the weapons of war, simply from fragments of shrapnel. While we, and particularly us in the UK, have become a people specialized in ways of killing, disabling, and traumatizing one another. In this country, under this government, and with our taxes, every year tens of millions of pounds of military hardware and tech are shipped around the world, implicated in death and destruction, not only in Palestine, but in many other countries too. Shame. Last week, our new right-wing government suspended fewer than 10% of 350 export licenses that it maintains with the State of Israel. Among those still active licenses are those for parts used in Israel's fleet of warplanes. It is planes like these that fired the missiles on Palestinians as they slept in their tents in Al-Mawasi during the early hours of Tuesday morning. A supposed humanitarian zone. Another massacre. A matter of months ago, Labour were calling for the Tories to release the legal guidance concerning our government's complicity in the genocide. Now in government, they refuse to release the very same guidance. Shame. The UK government is complicit in this violence, in Israel's genocide, and at its imperial core is responsible for the century-long occupation of Palestine. As healthcare workers, we not only treat diseases and fix broken bones, but we are also responsible for exposing the things that make us sick. Settler colonialism is sickness, settler colonialism is violence, and settler colonialism is death. End the genocide, end the occupation, and free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Now you remember earlier this year when the Tories were calling us hate marchers and they were trying to attack our movement. Michael Gove singled out a number of organizations in Parliament as part of their Islamophobic witch hunt against the people in this movement and against the Muslims of this country. But we know that we are fighting against all forms of racism, including Islamophobia, and I'm proud to work with this organization to make some noise for Ala Mohammed, who's representing the Muslim Association of Britain.
Sisters, brothers, friends, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. The hospital massacre, the flower massacre, the tent massacre, the school massacre, the Eid massacre, massacre after massacre. We name them now, not just to mourn, but because we must count the dead. The dead who number in the thousands, buried beneath the rubble of Gaza, beneath the lies of the media, beneath the indifference of governments who watch from the ivory towers. As children burn, as families are erased. We are forced to name these atrocities just to tell them apart. Forced to create new categories of horror because old words aren't enough. We name them to expose the brutal truth. That is, Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people is relentless, systemic, and deliberate. Our message to those sitting across the road is clear. Every day you continue to arm Israel, every day you protect it from accountability is another day you are complicit in genocide. We stand here knowing that every day is a day closer to the day of accountability. The day will come when those responsible for this genocide, the politicians, the generals, the arms dealers, the media propagandists, will stand trial before the world. And when the walls of apartheid fall, when the last checkpoint is brought down, when the genocidal regime is dismantled, when the people of Palestine are free, the world will remember who stood with the oppressed and who stood with the oppressors. Our role as a movement is to continue to raise our voice. There is no business as usual when every day Israel is committing a new war crime. We refuse to normalize the horrifying scenes. We will remind them of their complicity every single day they refuse to take action. We will not stop until the total, complete and unconditional liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ala. Now we're on to our last speaker. Woo! We're on to the last speaker of the day, and I'm really proud to introduce him. He's from the Stop the War Coalition, which has been one of the organizers of every demonstration that we've had in the last 11 months, but it has also, for the last 20 years, fought to ensure that Palestine has been front and center of the anti-war movement from the opposition to the war against Iraq up till today. And it's because of the unity of our movement that we have terrified this government. So please make some noise for the Vice Chair of the Stop the War Coalition, Chris 9M.
Congratulations to all of you for coming out tonight once again. We are here to respond and to bear witness to yet another murderous and, I believe, deliberate attack, this time on a humanitarian zone. To another act of unimaginable horror. But we also here to bear witness to the fact that there is an enormous gulf between the official response in British society and the reality on the ground. There is an enormous gulf between the politicians and the people. And we are here to say that our government is not representing us, and it is not representing the majority of people in this country. We are here to go further and to say that our government is complicit in the genocide. We are here to go further and to say that the truth is, given the role of the British government in supporting the US at the United Nations, given the role of the British government as being the main champion on the world stage of US foreign policy towards Israel, this genocide could not be happening without the support of the British government. Now, anyone who thinks, anyone who says or thinks that what happens in foreign policy is none of their business isn't paying attention. During this genocide, the political discourse in this country has been degraded. How could supporting a genocide not have a toxic effect on politics? Islamophobia has been ramped up by the politicians and by the media, and it's been picked up by Tommy Robinson and his fascist thugs as they've rioted on our streets. Freedom of speech is under attack. Journalists, activists have been picked up on the streets. They've had their homes raided in the morning. They've been taken into detention for simply reporting the truth about what is happening on the ground in Gaza. And now there have been unprecedented attempts to clamp down, to restrict, to provide obstacles in our right of protest and our right to demonstrate. And I want to thank each and every one of you who made it clear last Saturday, last week, that whatever the threats from the police, whatever the threats from the authorities, you would be marching anyway. And it was that spirit of solidarity, that spirit of defiance ensured that last Saturday we had a victory for the right to protest. The police were forced to back down, and it was a major step forward, a major victory for the whole of the movement. But we also have to say, and we have said from the beginning, that there is another way in which these wars, the support for Israel, the backing of the genocide, affects every one of us. We've said from the beginning that every pound spent arming Israel, every pound backing war in different parts of the globe is a pound that is not spent on our schools, that is not spent on our hospitals, that is not spent on our housing, that is not spent on our wages. And unfortunately, within 2 months of being elected, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have proved this in the most appalling way. We are now in the extraordinary situation of having a new Labour government that spends £500 million, or commits to continuing to spend £500 million a year in support of Israel, that spends billions on a war in Ukraine, that is ramping up arms spending overall, and yet insists on cutting its lifeline to freezing pensioners this winter. This is a government completely adrift. This is a government with a hole where its heart should be. This is a government that needs to be confronted. And this is why the next demonstration called by the coalition is a demonstration in Liverpool in 10 days' time on the 21st of September at the Labour Party conference. And make sure that you are there. It is all of our duties to be there. It is a matter of principle that we have to be there to try and turn this government around. And the final thing I want to say, is this. Don't let anyone tell you that what we are doing isn't working, that what we are doing isn't making a difference. It's extraordinarily frustrating that we are coming up to a year of this genocide, but it is nevertheless the case that step by step the movement is growing and our influence on society is increasing. Israel is isolated on the world stage. Israel has become a pariah state. Even in Israel itself, hundreds of thousands of people are now calling for a ceasefire and calling for an end to the Netanyahu government. That simply wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for this global movement. And the scenes today, and they were heartening, and they were inspiring, the scenes today of the Palestinian ambassador receiving a standing ovation at the Trade Union Congress was historic. The fact that the TUC voted unanimously that this government must stop giving arms to Israel is a massive step forward. It is unprecedented. The fact that the TUC Congress voted to support workers who take action, who get on the days of action to free Palestine, calling for a ceasefire, is itself a massive step forward and is unprecedented. It shows that our movement is growing in influence, that we are influencing the very heart of the trade union and workers' movement in this country, and that is an extraordinary thing and a massive step forward. Solidarity with all of you today. Make sure you come to Liverpool. Make sure you also have in your minds the next national demonstration, which is going to be at that shameful moment of 1 year on in the genocide. It's taking place on the streets of London on the 5th of October. We want to make sure that is another massive display of opposition to our government's collusion, a massive display of opposition to our government's participation in this genocide, and that it is another step forward in building this movement to the scale that can deliver what we are all looking for. There are only a handful of people in British society now who really support what Israel is doing. 8% of people, 8%, a tiny minority of the British population who are backing the government, who are backing the establishment, who are backing the warmongers. We represent the overwhelming majority of people in this country. We represent the vast majority of decent people who believe that a genocide has to end, that there has to be a ceasefire. Our job is to turn that majority into mobilisation on the streets. 1 year on, we need to make sure there's not just 100,000 marching, not just 200,000. We need to make sure that the whole of London is brought to a standstill on October the 5th. See you there, solidarity!
Solidarity!
Thank you very much, Chris. Before you all go, I'm going to make a couple of announcements and then we can do some more chanting. The first is, as Chris said, make some noise if you're coming to the demonstration in Liverpool on the 21st. Because if Keir Starmer thought that he could have a honeymoon conference, we're there to prove him wrong. And make some noise if you're going to be out on the streets on the 5th of October. And the second thing is, that it is because we are marching, it is because we're defiant, and because we're on the streets, that we are pushing this government back. But we need to make sure that every mobilization is even bigger than the last. And it's up to every single one of us to do everything we possibly can in the next 2 weeks, in the next 4 weeks, to make those demonstrations as big as they possibly can. We need this movement to be rooted in every town, in every community, in every city in this country. So I urge you all to join the organizations of the coalition, join the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Stop the War, CND, MAB, FOA, PFB, because it's only by us getting organized and by us staying united that we can keep this movement going. Is that these demonstrations cost a lot of money. So there are people with green buckets around. If on your way out you can spare some change, that would help us to keep